This is That Guy Jig Sports Podcast. I am him, JIG. Subscribe, rate, review, Amazon, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Check us out. And don't forget about the Instagram at That Guy Jig. 38 days, folks. We have 38 days until NCAA football is back. Now, I know the college football game has returned. It's been 11 years since we got NCAA football, the game. And that's back. If you got the early release, you have been playing it. If not, you're waiting until Thursday. A couple days away. But nonetheless, we have 38 days until college football returns. But we've gotten some big news in the meanwhile. Florida State and Clemson are trying to get to the Big 12. And if you're a Florida State or Clemson fan, you love this move. You love this move. You get to go to the Big 12. You get out of the ACC. You get a foothold in Texas in recruiting. And you probably get almost an automatic bid to the college playoffs every year. The Big 12 is a very competitive league top to bottom. Make no bones about it. Top to bottom, the Big 12 is a very even keel that I feel like they have a lot more than 3 or 4 top teams. But if you were to add a Clemson or a Florida State to this conference, it would be a different scenario. Clemson is a team that has 4 national championships in 10 years. Clemson is a team that goes to the college playoffs. Clemson and Florida State are teams that bring in 5-star recruits regularly. You give them a conference like the Big 12 for football, a new stomping ground, a new territory, new food, new meat. I predict Clemson and Florida State make a regular appearance in the college football playoffs. They don't have to worry about being left out. I think being left out last year by Florida State, I think them being left out last year really created a different type of panic amongst them. It created a panic of, is the ACC good enough to get in? Because there's going to be years, folks, make no bones about it here. There's going to be years where there's 4 teams in the Big Ten and there's 4 teams in the SEC getting in. That's just the nature of the beast, folks. These conferences are getting the most money from these TV deals. So expect them to go to that next level faster. The Big Ten and the SEC will have at least 2 to 3 teams in every year. But like I said, there will be those off years where we will see 4 Big Ten teams, where we will see 4 SEC teams. Do I want to see that? Hell no, I get it. Everybody wants to see the Cinderella. But listen, this is about money and this is about the best football, folks. We have to understand where we are right now. This is no longer Disney. This is no longer Cinderella and the glass slipper. This is about money. This is about who has it. And this is about who has the best players and who can develop the best players. That, like I've been saying, I will continue to say, there will be a gap. Eventually, all this conference realignment, all this conference jumping and expansion talk, and this shit don't matter. Because eventually it's going to be one mega conference. So until we get there, I guess we can eat this bullshit up. I guess you can bring me a couple skirt steaks. Until the filet mignon comes, I guess I'll eat a couple skirt steaks because they're still steaks. But please make sure they are medium rare. But my point is, in the meantime, I guess we can do some conference jumping. But I want you to know, I want you to be aware that the major mega conference is on its way. The super conference is on its way. It's inevitable. It's literally inevitable at this point. Because if the ACC blows up, every conference is going to get a piece, just like we saw with the Pac-12. Every conference is going to get a piece. Now we're going to have the Power 3. You're going to have the Big 12, SEC, Big 10. At this point, if the Big 12 were to add Florida State and Clemson, they may get more money at a TV deal because you're essentially bringing back a OU and a Texas in a sense of championships and wins. Over the last 10 to 15 years, those programs are pretty, especially Clemson. Florida State, not so much as far as consistency. I know they got that chip with Jameis and Jimbo. But as far as consistency, Florida State's been, but last year was a great year. Let's see if they build. But you bring these 2 teams to the Big 12 and hope you get more money, but you're still not going to get Big 10 SEC money. There's just no way in Zeus's asshole. The SEC has Alabama, LSU, Georgia. And they just added OU and Texas. Not to mention, they still have teams like Auburn and Florida who have won championships in the past 20 years, past 15 years. You look at the Big Ten. The Big Ten is a couple of programs starting to use NIL money to get themselves quarterbacks away from being in the same position. Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, of course, carry the Big Ten. But now you add in Oregon, you add in USC, you add in you hope Wisconsin and Nebraska and Iowa can continue to get better. Because if that happens, now we're talking about different strokes and different folks, and we're talking about an even bigger gap. But overall, I do believe Florida State and Clemson will eventually end up in the Big 12. I think they're going to force their way out. 3 years. I give it 3 years max. Florida State, Clemson are in the Big 12. If not, there'll probably be a mega conference. But we are continuing Joel Klatt's top 25 breakdown and doing our own little spin with it. You know how we do. This week we're starting with LSU. Now we know what LSU did last year, 10-3. We know they had the Heisman winner, Jaden Daniels. We know they had probably one of the best wide receivers in Malik Neighbors. They don't have these guys no more. And the offensive coordinator who was calling all these plays, he left and went to Notre Dame. So now when you look at this LSU team, yes, they bring in C.J. Daniels, who's from Liberty, had 10 touchdowns, 1,000 yards last year. Yes, they bring in Xavier Thomas from Mississippi State just down the road. But overall, when you look at what they've lost, you cannot take away from that. You cannot look past that. Transfer portal rank is at a 41. Recruiting ranks at 9. We know LSU is always going to be able to recruit. 6 of their guys got drafted. That just furthers my point. They're going to get talent. They're going to lose talent. They're going to get talent back. But this is one of those years where it's kind of a tweener. This is a tweener year for LSU. Even though they have a very good roster, they have a very servable roster, their schedule is not light. When you start your season at USC, neutral site, then you play, warm-up game at South Carolina, UCLA, warm-up game, and then you're really into the SEC schedule. You got Ole Miss at home, you go to Arkansas, you go to Texas A&M, and then from there you're in a kind of a gauntlet. Bama comes to LSU. You go to the swamp. You got a cupcake in Vanderbilt, and then OU comes to Death Valley. Overall, I think this roster is going to be very servable, but I do see them losing 2 to 3 games, and possibly 4. LSU will be a very servable bowl team. Now, the team next year, where they bring in the number 1 recruiting class on top of this stuff, and they add, and now we're going to be talking about a more explosive team. But as for right now, for what we're looking at a 3 to 4 loss LSU team. And if they can't stay healthy, they might lose more. I'm telling people right now, South Carolina is going to be a tough football team to beat. They're going to be able to run the ball, and they have some pretty good wide receivers out there. Ole Miss, we know what they're doing. Texas A&M, that's going to be a tough place to play at. Kyle Field is never easy to go play at. But when you play Alabama, Florida, and OU in 3 of your last 4, that is a tough hiccup. Good thing is they got 3 of their last 4 at home. That's good for LSU. It's very hard to play down there in LSU in Death Valley, and they got 3 of their last 4 at home. But I still see them losing 3 to 4 games easily, just because you got Bama, Ole Miss, and OU. I think OU could get them on the road, and I think that USC game, first game of the season, could be tough. Miller Moss is a guy who's coming in with a chip on his shoulder. USC has a very good offense. This is going to be a very big test. That is going to be a high-scoring game. That's going to be one of those games where we look back when the score is 45 to 32 or something like that and say, holy shit, for the first week of the season, that was a great game to be a part of. So I have LSU losing 3, maybe 4 games, depending. Definitely going to a bowl. Definitely. Moving on to the next one, we're looking at Clemson. Now this is an interesting year for Clemson because this is their second. Now this is K Klubnik's second year, so he has to take a jump. They finished 9-4 last season, 6th in the ACC, 15th ranked recruiting class. They don't do transfer portal. Listen to Dabo talk about the portal. He doesn't need it. He doesn't like it. He doesn't need it. And they have a very, very, very favorable schedule. Outside of on the road of Florida State, they get Louisville at home. and they go at a neutral site to Georgia. Other than that, this is a very favorable schedule for Clemson. You get Georgia neutral site, first game of the season. You go App State at home. You go NC State at home. Stanford at home. At Florida State at Wake. You get Virginia and Louisville at home. Virginia Tech and Pittsburgh are road games. And then you get the Citadel and South Carolina at home. This is a Clemson team that's looking probably like they'll probably lose 2 games. With this record, with this schedule, Georgia and Florida State are the only 2 games where I could really consider them losing. Louisville is going to be a very servable team, a very good team, but I think Clemson is going to be able to make some noise and possibly get into the playoffs again. This is a team that could possibly get into the playoffs this year. If Cade Klubnik can take that next step, it's the turnovers. If he can cut down on his turnovers, if he can make smart decisions, watch out for Clemson, dude. Watch out for Clemson. Because the ACC is depending on Clemson, Florida State, and Miami this year. They need them. They finished 9-4 last year. I can see them going 11-2. 11-2, 13-1, and depending on if they can beat Florida State. I don't know if they're beating Georgia. Kirby Smart is just coaching and getting players that are just from a different planet right now. So that's why I don't know if they're going to get Georgia. First game of the season, too, that's going to be tough. Carson Beck is one of the nation's best quarterbacks. He's definitely a program leader. He understands his role in the offense. He understands what his job is. So look for that. I look for Clemson to have a very good year. I think Dabo talked shit back to that reporter that heckled him last year for those 4 losses. Staying in the ACC, we got Florida State. Now, Florida State is one of these teams that likes the portal and they like to recruit. 6th transfer portal rank, and they got the 12th ranked recruiting class. They finished first in the ACC. They won the ACC. They did not make the playoffs. They got left out. And we had to hear about it for about 5 to 6 months. And now I believe this is the main reason for this whole Big 12 move for Florida State. I believe if Florida State gets into the playoffs last year, they aren't bitching about going to the Big 12. They aren't bitching. They're not trying to leave. We listened to this university and their fans complain and moan for 3 months. For 3 months. Now this is the time where they've gotten a lot of transfers in. They got DJ, who started at Clemson, went to Oregon State, now he's at Florida State. He's trying to have that Dylan Gabriel, Baker Mayfield, he's just trying to have that year. That transfer portal year where I show the nation what I can do, where I improve my draft stock, where I might be able to get my family generational money because I go out here and I do what I'm supposed to do. Well, DJ, you get your chance. And Florida State has a favorable, it's favorable. We got Georgia Tech, Boston College, Memphis, and Cal all at home. Your first 4 games are at home, with Georgia Tech being neutral, sorry. So your first 3 games are at home. SMU on the road. You got Clemson at home. Duke and Miami are road games, followed by UNC coming to Florida State. You go to Notre Dame. You got a cupcake and you got Florida. This could be a 2 to 3 loss team. But this could also be a 1-loss team. The fact that they have to go to Miami and to Notre Dame is going to be tough. They get Clemson at home, so that's good. They get Florida State at home. They get Florida at home, so that's good. But you listen to me and you hear me now. The Notre Dame and the Miami road games are going to be tough for them, and that UNC coming to Tallahassee is going to be tough because UNC is in between Miami and Notre Dame. So that is going to, that's a tough 3-game stretch for them. Miami, UNC, Notre Dame. That's going to be a tough 3-game stretch for them. If they can get through that with 1 loss or no losses, that is a successful season, and they will find themselves in the playoffs. Florida State has set themselves up, man. They've set themselves up for something good. Like I said, the 6th ranked transfer portal class. And last year they had a top 15 recruiting class, so you're stacking this. Now you're stacking. Now you're stacking recruiting classes and you're stacking transfer portal. Jay Norvell knows what he's doing. I like Florida State. I think they have a chance to do something. Now this next team, this is my dark horse. This is one of my dark horses is to not only make it to the college playoffs, but also win it. Notre Dame. Look at Notre Dame, what they did in the portal. They have a 9th ranked recruiting class, which is unheard of. A Notre Dame with a high-ranked recruiting class is unheard of. Things are changing with NIL. Things are changing not just for money, but for all for academics. Schools understand what they need to do. And when you look at Notre Dame's schedule, they start the season off at Kyle Field. That's going to be tough. Northern Illinois, Purdue, Miami of Ohio, Louisville, Stanford. You got a neutral game site with Georgia Tech and Navy. And then you got Florida State, Virginia, a neutral site with Army and USC. This is a team that can lose one game in the regular season, and this is that Florida State game. USC is on the road, so that's going to be a tough one. And the Texas A&M game on the road is going to be a tough one. But listen to me. Notre Dame went out and got themselves a quarterback named Riley Leonard. I don't know if you know him, but he played at Duke. He's a pretty tough, savvy quarterback. But they also got a top 10 wide receiver last year in Chris Mitchell, transfer from FIU. The guy had 1,100 yards and 7 tuds. This offense is going to be explosive. They got the LSU offensive coordinator that I mentioned earlier. And they have Marcus Freeman, who's going to be, I think he's going to be a more hungrier head coach. I think this defense is going to be more aggressive. I think Notre Dame has a very favorable schedule. You mark my words. Notre Dame is going to be a playoff team. Book it. You book it. Notre Dame will be a playoff team with their roster, with their schedule, with everything that comes with it. You mark my words. And the last team that we're going to break down this time is going to be Missouri. Now, this Missouri team has a lot of talent, but it also has a very tough schedule. Even though they don't play Georgia and they don't play Texas and they don't play Ole Miss, they still have a tough schedule. When you look at it, considering they had the 20th ranked recruiting class, when you look at the fact that they had the 14th ranked transfer portal, but when you look at the schedule of Murray State, Buffalo, BC, and Vanderbilt, you're starting 4-0. But then you go to Texas A&M, you got UMass, Auburn, at Alabama, OU, at South Carolina, at Mississippi State, and Arkansas. Now, the Auburn, Alabama, OU, at South Carolina, that 4-game stretch is going to be a very interesting stretch. Because you got Auburn, Alabama, then OU, then South Carolina. That is going to be a very interesting stretch for them. If they can get through that stretch with 1 loss, 2 loss, that's a win. I think Missouri is a 2 to 3 loss team this year. I think Missouri has a lot of talent on this team that could take them to the playoffs. I think they have a first rounder in the quarterback at Brady Cook. I think they also have the best wide receiver in Luther. I think this team has a chance to be great, but it's all going to have to come together. And that 4-game stretch is tough. So this is a team that I can see a boom or bust. Either they're going to go 1 loss or they're going to have 3 or 4 because they can't stay healthy. And that's just how I feel about it. But we still have 38 days, folks. So we're going to have to, we're getting through this together. And I appreciate you for being here. And once again, this is That Guy Jig Sports Podcast. I am him, JIG. Subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend to tell a friend. And that way we can all be friends. But once again, this is That Guy Jig, and I am him, JIG. Thanks for listening. Peace.